Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to this morning's Bhagavatam class. We are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 2, titled Remembrance of Lord Krishna, and the verse is 6. Before we read the verse, we recite the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sanakar Bhagaval Lokan Nirlokam Punaragataha Vimjaya Nitra Viduram Prityahodava Utsmayan Sanakar Bhagaval Lokan Nirlokam Punarajataha Vimjaya Nitra Viduram Prityahodava Utsmayam Sanakar Bhagaval Lokan Nirlokam Punaragataha Vimjaya Nitra Viduram Prityahodava Utsmayam Sanakar Bhagaval Lokan Nirlokam Punaragataha Vimjaya Nitra Viduram Prityahodava Utsmayan. Word for word translation. Sanakai, gradually. Bhagavat, the Lord. Lokat, from the abode. Nirlokam, the planet of the human beings. Puna agataha, coming again. Vimrajaya, wiping. Netre, eyes. Viduram, unto Vidura. Pritya, in affection. Aha, said. Udava, Udava. Utsmayan, by all those remembrances. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Abhay Charana Ravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. The great devotee Uddhava soon came back from the abode of the Lord to the human plane, and wiping his eyes, he awakened his reminiscence of the past and spoke to Vidura in a pleasing mood. Purport. When Uddhava was fully absorbed in the transcendental ecstasy of love of God, he actually forgot all about the external world. The pure devotee lives constantly in the abode of the Supreme Lord, even in the present body, which apparently belongs to this world. The pure devotee is not exactly on the bodily plane, since he is absorbed in the transcendental thought of the Supreme. When Uddhava wanted to speak to Vidura, he came down from the abode of the Lord, Dwaraka, to the material plane of human beings. Even though a pure devotee is present on this mortal planet, he is here in relation to the Lord for engagement in transcendental loving service, and not for any material cause. A living entity can live either on the material plane or in the transcendental abode of the Lord, in accordance with his existential condition. The conditional changes of the living entity are explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the instructions given to Srila Rupa Goswami by Lord Sri Chaitanya. The living entities all over the universe are enjoying the effects of the respective fruited results of their own work, life after life. Out of all of them, some may be influenced by the association of pure devotees and thus get the chance to execute devotional service by attainment of taste. This taste is the seed of devotional service, and one who is fortunate enough to have received such a seed is advised to sow it in the core of his heart. As one cultivates a seed by pouring water to fructify it, The seed of devotional service sown in the heart of the devotee may be cultured by pouring water in the form of hearing and chanting of the holy name and pastime to the Lord. The creeper of devotional service, so nourished, gradually grows, and the devotee, acting as a gardener, goes on pouring the water of constant hearing and chanting. Shravanam Kirtanam. The creeper of devotional service gradually grows so high that it passes through the entire material universe and enters into the spiritual sky, growing still higher and higher until it reaches the planet Goloka Vrindavan. The devotee gardener is in touch with the abode of the Lord even from the material plane by dint of performing devotional service to the Lord simply by hearing and chanting. As the creeper takes shelter of another, stronger tree, similarly, the creeper of devotional service, nourished by the devotee, takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord and thus becomes fixed. When the creeper is fixed, then the fruit of the creeper comes into existence, and the gardener who nourished it is able to enjoy this fruit of love, and his life becomes successful. That Uddhava attained this stage is evident from his dealings. He could simultaneously reach the supreme planet and still appear in this world. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakkamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Scha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Shute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatirubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaham Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I'll read the translation again. The great devotee Uddhava soon, Canto 3, Chapter 2, Text 6. The great devotee Uddhava soon came back from the abode of the Lord to the human plane, and wiping his eyes, he awakened his reminiscence of the past and spoke to Vidura in a pleasing mood. Such a beautiful purport. As I was reading through it, I thought I was reading Madhurya Kadambini, the flowering of devotional service and how it fructifies and it brings us to the desired goal. So here we see Vidura is asking Uddhava about Krishna. And in one sense, if you see, as they say in English, you're getting a taste of your own medicine. Uddhava, when he went to Vrindavan, he was telling the gopis, he was telling the Vrajavasis, the residents of Vrindavan and the gopis about Krishna, and they were plunged in an ocean of separation. And here, when he's being asked, he's also plunged in the same ocean of separation. So he's getting to experience what the Rajavasis were experiencing. This is described, I believe, in the 10th canto, 46th chapter. Uddhava, I can't remember the name of the chapter, but Uddhava visits Vrindavan. And as soon as he enters Vrindavan, he goes straight to the house of Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda, and then Nanda Maharaj first starts asking, how is the son of Sura doing? Do they fare well? He's asking how are people there, and then finally asks, what about Govinda? Is he ever going to come back? Does he think about us? And then he proceeds to saying that, he's slowly moving into that state of consciousness that Uddhava, or the state of ecstasy that Uddhava is experiencing here, where he says, actually, when we think of I'm paraphrasing, when we think of the superhuman pastimes of Krishna, all the wondrous deeds that he did, we are freed from this material entanglement. And then, as he's thinking about it, interestingly, when I was reading it, he says, I think Krishna and Balaram are two great demigods who came to this earth, for the benefit of humankind. And this was foretold to me by Garga Muni. So he's remembering all of this, and then as he remembers this, he just drops silent, and he's feeling that state of separation. He's feeling that ecstasy that Uddhava is experiencing here. So we see with great devotees, obviously, these are eternal associates of the Lord. Even just a slight nudge, just a slight poke, or just something about Krishna, they immediately, the consciousness just becomes, it transfers immediately from the mundane plane that we are into the spiritual realm. And actually, you can see that even in the life of Srila Prabhupada. For us, or for Srila Prabhupada, if at any moment when he was meeting someone, if the conversation started from a mundane topic, for example, someone would come and tell Prabhupada about the cars, how wonderful are these cars, and Prabhupada would just listen, and Prabhupada so expertly would dovetail the conversation into Krishna. Whereas for us, it's the other way around. We start talking about Krishna, and then slowly we diverge into, at least for myself, next thing I know, half an hour goes by, and how did we start this conversation? Oh, we're talking about Krishna. Oh, okay. This is how, at least for myself, I speak for myself. But there's this beautiful pastime in the Lilamrita, if you ever get a chance to read. I just know the page numbers because I read it this morning. Volume 1, page 647 to 650. This happens in New Jagannath Puri, which is in San Francisco. Yeah. So Govinda Dasi, one of the early disciples and pioneers, Srila Prabhupada's movement, she was generally very shy and she wouldn't ask questions in public. And after every lecture, Prabhupada would ask any questions, and sometimes, no one would ask any questions. So Govinda Dasi always had this thought, and she had read in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, or she had read somewhere that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would always say, where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? And fall unconscious and just, float in the river. And she was like, what is this? She just couldn't fully fathom what was happening. So anyway, after one lecture, she asks, as usual, Prabhupada would say, any questions? And no one was asking any question. And Govinda Dasi said, okay, maybe this is a good opportunity for me to ask. So anyway, she puts up her hand and says, Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada like, yes. Lord Chaitanya is asking, where is Krishna? Something like that, to that extent. And Srila Prabhupada understood exactly what she was referring to. Oh yes, you see, even though Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, but he keeps asking, where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? And that is our mood. That is the state of perfection, that we always looking for Krishna. And I'll get to that in a bit, but obviously we see in the Bhagavad Gita 6:30, for one who sees me everywhere and sees me in everything, I'm never lost to him, nor is he ever lost to me. So Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the only example. Prabhupada was saying that, is saying, where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? They're mad after Krishna. He's just searching for Krishna everywhere. Even though he's seeing Krishna, but he's asking, where is Krishna? And then, following in the footsteps of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, similarly, the 6 Goswamis are always in the same mood, always hankering to, where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? And as Srila Prabhupada is so emphatically saying this over and over again, they notice that Srila Prabhupada all of a sudden just goes very calm. He closes his eyes, and then he's like, where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? And then he's quiet. It's like the scene that is described in Lilamrita, like this devotional stillness in the whole atmosphere. A lot of times that happens with us too, when we are in the presence of a senior devotee, and there's this moment when the devotees experience something that we aren't experiencing, and we sit there, okay, let's just relish this moment. And then Srila Prabhupada there is basically 2 minutes, 4 minutes go by, and then all of a sudden they see Srila Prabhupada just opening his eyes slowly, and someone is trying to play kartal, and Prabhupada's eyes which is filled with tears, and he starts singing, and then Kirtan sets in, and after that, after a little while, they end the Kirtan, and then everyone goes back to their respective location, and they're like, wow. So Srila Prabhupada obviously didn't acknowledge it in public, but people there could see exactly that Prabhupada was experiencing the same state of ecstasy that we see pure devotees experiencing here. And we see it again in the lives of contemporary devotees too. For example, I think at the moment as we're speaking, I believe it's the 25th disappearance anniversary of His Holiness Gaur Govinda, Swami Maharaj, and there's so many wonderful remembrances and pastimes that are being shared by so many exalted devotees, sannyasis, all over the globe. And we see in his life too, he embodied this principle of just constant, the way he would speak, and at times he would, the way he conducted himself, you could see that he's at that level, at least from what we see. And his, obviously his glories are unlimited, as the glories of pure devotees are. The more we speak, the more we get purified. So I just wanted to speak a bit here on how Uddhava is actually, you can see he's absorbed, constantly absorbed in Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada defines that as smaranam, constant absorption in Krishna. Even though the English word that we find equivalent is called remembrance, but the word remembrance really doesn't do much justice. So it's constant absorption in Krishna, and that's what Srila Prabhupada defined smaranam to be. And I was saying that remembrance is really doesn't do justice, because our default position in this material world is not to remember Krishna. We may, we're practicing Krishna consciousness. We are engaged in the 9 processes of bhakti. We hear, chant, we do all of that. But at that moment when Krishna tests us, I'm not sure here, but at least I'm sure in colleges, schools here, there is this concept of a pop quiz. So when you're at a school or a college or a university, and you're doing your course, and all of a sudden you go to class one day and the instructor says, all right guys, it's pop quiz. And at that very moment you're being tested on things that spontaneously at the moment. You haven't prepared for it, but we are tested for it, and that gets graded. I don't know how different places have different gradations on that, but so similarly in our life too, Krishna from time to time will give us a certain nudge, and that comes that's in the form of a pop quiz. That do we remember Krishna that time? That's why thinking of Krishna in times of crisis becomes Krishna is preparing us, because ultimately the biggest test comes at the time of death. It was described in the 8th chapter. So, again, like I said earlier, what is Smaranam? Srila Prabhupada says that in the 6th chapter, 630, for one who sees me everywhere and everything in me, I'm never lost to him, nor is he ever lost to me. So that's the Vaishnava worldview, that Krishna is the source of everything. And are we really seeing Krishna everywhere? Are we really molding our lives in such a way that we see Krishna everywhere? And when we read the Bhagavatam, we see that the person who embodies Smaranam is Prahlad Maharaj. And actually, so a lot of this discussion of Smaranam that I'm happening to share here is, I was fortunate enough to listen to a really nice class by a very senior disciple of His Holiness Mukunda Goswami, and she's the wife of Yudhishthira Prabhu, who's a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. Her name is Radha Vinod from San Diego. And she was really beautiful in describing this process of Smaranam. And again, how thinking of Krishna in times of crisis. And she said an interesting point, which obviously you all here would have caught on, but I didn't. That in the Bhagavatam, we read, in the 7th canto, we read about 7 chapters dedicated to Prahlad Maharaj. And they're from the time of the atrocities to the time of Nrsingadev appearing. It's actually just 1 year of Prahlad Maharaj's life that's being described there. Even though he went on to rule this planet of whatever area he was ruling, he went on to rule for hundreds of years, but that you don't find much of that description in the Bhagavatam. What you find is that 1 year that he, externally you could say that the atrocities that he was put into by his father, all the difficulties that he had, and his devotional maturity that we see in that. It's only 1 year of his life, because that in that 1 year he perfected that Smaranam, or that we see the perfection of Smaranam in that, and that's what's most important for us to learn from that example, as opposed to the other many years that we don't see much of a mention in the Bhagavatam. So thinking of Krishna in terms of crisis, how do we, and again another example is, I'll get to that in a bit, but is someone who really, what's the perfection of Smaranam? Who is the perfection of Smaranam is Ambarish Maharaj. How he engaged in all of the 9 processes of bhakti, his eyes for seeing the deity, his ears for hearing the scripture, his tongue for tasting the prasadam, hands for cleaning the temple, so on and so forth. And even though there are these 9 limbs of bhakti, and any one of them can actually take us back to Godhead or give us that perfection, but when we engage in more than one process of bhakti, that fosters our Smaranam even more. It gives us that impetus for Smaranam, always being absorbed in the thoughts of Krishna. So now, when we read these examples, we ask ourselves, wow, that's Prahlad Maharaj, and this is me. How do I bridge that gap? Yeah. Or that's Ambarish Maharaj, and that's me. How will, it seems like a different world altogether. How do I, will I ever get there? Because that's what Srila Prabhupada, or that's what the Acharyas expect of us, to basically really be at that platform, come to that platform, be that example. So now a lot of, Smaranam, to cultivate Smaranam has to do with our mind. And you find, some beautiful songs in the Vaishnava literature, Bhaja Hare Mana, Sri Nandanandana, my dear mind, please take shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada commented on that in a very, in a way to teach us. He says, my dear mind, please don't be so dangerous. I tend to relate with that more than taking shelter of lotus feet of Krishna, because that's because of my conditioning, that I've seen my mind do some crazy things, to tell me some crazy things, and Whether I've acted on them or not, that's another discussion. But when we really see, when we really analyze our mind, we see a lot of what our mind, the way our mind functions, is actually driven by fear. And the process of Krishna consciousness is to not act on those fears. And those fears come from our conditioning. For example, little kids, right? When a parent is putting a little kid to bed, now somehow or the other, in the view of the kid, there are some monsters or demons that are around, and they're going to come to, they steal me away, or they're going to take me away. So the parent tells them, no, don't worry, I'm here. Don't worry, you'll be fine. So gradually, the child is being forced to trust the parent. Similarly, we, as practicing devotees, are, we have to trust the words of the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada, the Acharyas, and trust our fears. We need to basically let go of our fears, because our mind could be wrong. On so many occasions, the mind could tell us things that don't make any sense at all. At least for myself, at times, my mind has been driven by my conditioning. In my own mind, I'll create friends or enemies that have no factual or no objective reasoning behind it. Why is it? But just because I see this person as someone as being a threat to my existence, so guess what? I'm going to act in a way that'll justify my own fear. And if you really see in the Bhagavatam, two personalities justified exactly what they had to do: Kamsa and Hiranyakashipu. If you really see, they were both Vedic citizens. They lived in Vedic times. But for Hiranyakashipu, he lived on this principle that I am the greatest power on this planet. And anything that comes in that way, be it my own son telling me that Vishnu is the supreme, I am justified in killing my own child. That's what his mind is telling him. And he's totally justified in telling him, because that's what his mind is telling him. And similarly for Kamsa, he was fearful of the threat of death. But death can come at any time and take away everything you've done, which is true. But he was, he not only did he want to kill his sister, but he actually ended up killing the children of his sister. Such a heinous thing. If someone wanted to do that today, depending on which country you're in, you could be executed, or even more. So these two personalities are driven by fear of their mind, that the mind is actually telling them, and then they're justified in doing so. So similarly for us, we will say, we're not a Kamsa or Hiranyakashipu, but just ask ourselves, what has our mind told us from time to time? I was remembering once, I was actually one devotee who was a good friend of mine, who is a disciple of his own is Gunagrahi Maharaj. And one Gunagrahi Maharaj was chanting japa with this devotee. And all of a sudden, Gunagrahi Maharaj started laughing. Like, this devotee thought that maybe he's seeing some Krishna's pastimes, something like that. He's like, Maharaj, you laughed? Yeah, my mind was telling me something, I just couldn't help laughing. And that's what it does at times. Like, you just have to laugh off things like, wow, what a silly thing. So we have to trust the Shastra, the words of the Shastra, the words of the Guru, the words of actually the advice of the devotees, obviously, depending on how much, depending on the relationship we have with that devotee who's telling us. And I'm not sure if any of you are aware of this personality called Russell Brand. He's... Anyway, Russell Brand is a famous celebrity in the outside world. Outside world. For the others, it'll be, they'll say the other way around. But anyway, he's a Vaishnav by the way he sees the world. So anyway, he said a beautiful quote, and this was quoted by Radha Dasi. A pain in the leg means don't put pressure on your leg. A pain in the mind means change your life. A pain in the mind means change your life. That means if there's something that's troubling you, try to see what it is, analyze it, and change your life. Change your perspective. And a lot of times, even for me, or for us, however you want to say it, is that we expect respect. It's natural for us to expect respect. And that's based on what are our expectations. And obviously, what we learn in Krishna consciousness gets filtered to a conditioned mind. And we, a lot of times they say that, I was remembering this once, I think Ganesham Prabhu was mentioning this, that, a lot of times we hear certain words, or, we are driven by certain statements of the Shastras, but a lot of times we filter that based on a conditioned mind. And he was telling me this, he was telling us, I think last, can't remember when, but when he was going out on books, I think he shared it with Devamrita Maharaj that he told Maharaj that, Maharaj, when I go out on book distribution, I see certain people and they seem very happy. And I feel like, why should I approach them? Because they're already so happy. And if I approach them, I'll just be interrupting in their, in their whatever sense gratification, or they're happy. Why should I approach them? And then Maharaj, in very short words, told him, that's because you're seeing not through the eyes of the Shastra, you're seeing through your mundane eyes. You're seeing that they're happy. But the Shastra says that people are unhappy, misguided, they're suffering in this Kali Yuga. And the only relief that's available is the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So you, or all of us, who basically are acting as servants of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, have a duty to perform, which is to enlighten people on this process of bhakti. So don't get carried away by what you see externally, because your mind is telling you that they are happy, but Shastra tells you otherwise. So trust the words of the Shastra. And like, for example, there are some people that that come through and through the website, register themselves for intro to bhakti, and as we interact with them, from outside their life seems very perfect. They're successful in what their life is, seems to be successfully positioned. But when you speak to them, they're so empty. Actually, they say that when I was 20, I wanted to go to law school, and I did. I was at the top of my law school. I'm just starting. I'm not giving actual information, but this is someone told me that I really did what I wanted to do. And it's been 7 years since I've graduated from law school. I'm working for the top law firm in Australia, and yet I feel there's something I still need to do. I haven't accomplished what I really wanted to do in my life. What should I do? And I came across a monk on the street, and they gave me a Bhagavad Gita, and I read it, and I felt that this appealed to me, and here I am. So, like I said, we see people that are seeking, that are looking for Krishna, and it's our duty to give it to them, or at least educate them on the process of bhakti, and how they take it up, what they do, to a certain extent is between them and Krishna, but we act as their well-wishers and their conduits. So, and a lot of times even detachment, right? We study detachment, and we think detachment to us means just, I'll be detached altogether. I don't care if I'm running around, without any clothes on, because I'm detached. But true detachment, as it's described in the Shastra, is to let go of those fears. Don't act on those fears that come up to you. I remember once, there's mention, obviously we learn that we should be humble. Many years ago, there was a program that I was organizing in America for His Grace Mahatma Prabhu. And I was, there were different devotees that took up different services to do. And then all of a sudden, I got the message from someone that there are all these pots in the kitchen that need to be washed. And I thought, wow, today I get to do a very humble service. So I go to the kitchen and start washing the pots. And then within 10 minutes, a senior devotee comes and says, "Hey, Radha Vinod, what are you doing?" And, with my pride, I said, "Oh, Prabhu, I'm washing the pots." He said, "You rascal, you're washing the pots, you're there, the program is going haywire because there are people coming in, they don't know where to go. There was no one there at the welcome booth. There's no one there at the welcome booth, they don't know where to go, they're going into different places, and here you are humbly washing pots. Go there and take care of that mess." And so there I realized that true humility means that we serve Krishna in whatever way He wants us to do. And sometimes that could just be of me letting go of my so-called definition of humility. It's just to show myself as someone very humble, but rather just be there at certain times. Also be as someone who has to take up that stick and just say, "Hey guys, just try to organize things in such a way that there's no interruption to Krishna's service in one sense." So how do we, especially for myself as Grihastas, how do we set up our lives in a way that we are able to always think of Krishna, remember Krishna, right? Because that's what Uddhava, just a few verses before this, it was mentioned that from his very childhood he was a devotee. He would play with the dolls. He was trained. He was being trained from a very young age. And Srila Prabhupada again, towards the end of the purport, speaks about how he said how we also had the good fortune of being trained up from a very, very young age. He's referring to himself and his spiritual master, his divine grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So how do we set up our lives? And a lot of times it becomes as when we're new to Krishna consciousness, or when someone is new to the practice of bhakti, we tell them just add Krishna into your life. Don't stop doing it. Just add Krishna. So we do different things, and then we try to add Krishna into that. We add Krishna in bits and pieces in our life. And Her Grace Mother Radha Devidasi was just saying, it's good, but it shouldn't stop there. It's just not you try to find holes to add Krishna, but rather you should make everything Krishna conscious, and and then try to work it that way. It's progressive. Try to add Krishna wherever you can, but then slowly come up, at a level to have Krishna as the center of your life. And we should ask ourselves: are we molding in a life that we are being pushed to think of Krishna in different aspects? And as we grow older, I can just say for myself, obviously, especially in the Grihastha ashram, there are different responsibilities, there are different challenges, there are different opportunities as well to serve Krishna in many different ways. So, am I making Krishna as a priority? And a lot of time that's more in the detail of how you add Krishna into your life. How do you make Krishna the center of your life at every different stage? One really good advice that I heard from Mataji was that make small changes but make them permanent. Rather than us going a full circle and saying, from tomorrow I'll be up at 2 a.m. and I'll only sleep at 11 p.m. the next day. I'll engage in Krishna service, but make small changes but make them permanent. And treat your life as an interaction with Krishna. Try to mold your life in such a way that at every aspect you are constantly endeavoring for that reciprocation from Krishna. Again, like I said, it's more on the detail than how you work it out. And Smaranam obviously comes, like I said earlier, all the 9 processes of bhakti can actually foster Smaranam, but hearing and chanting in particular has a very strong correlation to our Smaranam. And I was hearing His Grace Radhika Raman Prabhu really emphasizing on good hearing and chanting. And hearing means active listening. Because that active listening can really foster a Smaranam to such a great extent that we can't even think of. Sharing Krishna consciousness with others. So, and as she was describing, as Srila Prabhupada always had this practice that he would ask devotees, whatever you read, whatever you hear, write it down, or at least engage in writing, because that fosters your Smaranam. And I know, as for me myself, for the first few years of my Krishna consciousness, when I would attend classes, I would say, like, oh, I would see people taking notes. I'm like, what is this? Waste of time. Taking notes. But gradually I came to appreciate that, because I could see clearly the value of it, of taking notes, because by taking notes you're actually engaging in active listening. And sharing Krishna with others. That is, because when you share Krishna with others, obviously that you have the cooperation of the super soul there, helping you in that Smaranam. For instance, just an active listening in one of the sanghas, in some of the sangha groups that we run. People have been attending religiously, and they felt that they were being nourished in a way. But then we said, okay, let's try a different experiment. Rather than one speaker speaking every week, let's turn the table around and say, guys, each of you take up a topic. Here are the materials. Here are the references for you to research. Do a presentation based on this. And when we did that, there was just such a giant leap in one sense of their own. When they started speaking on what they had heard, from what they were told to hear, what they were told to read, and the references that they looked up, they felt, I never thought of Krishna consciousness, I never thought of this aspect of Krishna consciousness in such an endearing and personal way as now, because now I'm engaged in active listening. Now, because I have to speak, I'm absorbing so much more that I wouldn't have had. So, again, active listening, and again, with the expectation or with the goal of sharing Krishna with others, it has such a potent effect to perfect that Smaranam. Okay, I think I've gone through my time here, but yes, I'd just like to conclude on that this constant absorption of Krishna is not, it's been described by Acharyas as something that can be attained by all of us. And it's a practice that we have to go through. But again, as Krishna says, as as one surrenders unto me, he reciprocates accordingly. So the more, this one thing that I think I heard from Ganesham Prabhu, which I think was coming from Tamal Krishna Maharaj, is that the more you take others seriously, the more they'll take you seriously. So the same applies to Krishna. The more you take Krishna consciousness seriously, the more Krishna reciprocates with you. So that's what I would like to conclude with here. And obviously, like I said, as I'm speaking here, I felt when I read from this purport as something that's a reality check for me. A lot of times in a Krishna consciousness, we can get complacent with where we are at our stage of life or at our stage of bhakti as well. That, we're doing quite okay. But then when you hear about personalities such as Uddhava, Ambarish Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, it's like boom. Okay. Got a long way to go. But we're trying to head in that direction. So I will end here. If there are any questions or comments, maybe one. Or Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, the Go Premanande, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.